Imagine a man standing on a stage, thousands of eyes fixed on him, yet his mind drifts back to a small, cramped apartment in Detroit. The shadows of his past creep into the spotlight: broken furniture, empty cupboards, the sound of arguments that never seem to end. This man, one of the most successful and controversial rappers in the world, had once been so close to losing everything: his career, his family, even his life, to the silent enemy of addiction. This is not just a story about fame or money. It's a story about survival, resilience, and the ultimate fight for freedom. This is the story of how Marshall Bruce Mathers III, better known as Eminem, fought his way out of the darkness of drug addiction to reclaim his life. Eminem's story begins far from the glitz of music awards and sold-out arenas. Born on October 17, 1972 in St. Joseph, Missouri, Marshall was immediately cast into a world of instability. His father abandoned the family when he was an infant, leaving him in the care of his mother, Debbie. Their relationship was tumultuous, a blend of love, tension, and mutual frustration. Moving constantly through Detroit's rough neighborhoods, Eminem never had the sense of stability most children take for granted. From a young age, Marshall was an observer. He noticed the cruelty of the streets, the teasing at school, the stark inequalities around him. He was small, pale, and often the target of bullies. These early experiences were not just painful, they were formative. They taught him that life could be unfair, that survival required grit, and that the only voice he could fully control was his own. It was during these lonely, uncertain years that he discovered rap. Eminem didn't just listen to music. He absorbed it, dissected it, and mirrored its rhythm in his own life. LL Cool J, Run DMC, and the Beastie Boys were more than inspirations. They were lifelines. In the quiet of his room, Marshall would scribble lines and practice rhymes, each verse a battle against the isolation and frustration that defined his youth. Adolescence did not bring relief. If anything, life grew more chaotic. With his mother struggling financially and emotionally, Marshall often felt alone. He experimented with alcohol and drugs, not out of rebellion, but as an escape from the relentless pressure of life in Detroit. These early encounters with substances planted seeds that would grow into a dangerous dependency later in life. At the same time, Eminem found solace in rap battles. Detroit's underground hip-hop scene became his arena. Here he was not the small, shy boy from a broken home. He was Slim Shady, fearless, sharp-tongued, and relentless. Winning battles was not just about pride, it was survival. Each verse, each punchline, each rhyme was a declaration. I exist. I am more than the circumstances I was born into. By his late teens, Eminem's talent had begun to outshine the obstacles around him. Yet the path to recognition was littered with failures. His first album, Infinite, 1996, was a commercial flop. Critics dismissed it. Local audiences barely noticed it. But this failure was crucial. It forced Marshall to dig deeper, to find an even rawer, more honest voice. Out of this struggle, Slim Shady was born, a darker, edgier persona capable of confronting pain, anger, and frustration without compromise. Slim Shady was more than a stage name. He was a survival mechanism. Through Slim Shady, Eminem could speak truth that terrified, entertained, and captivated audiences. This persona became his sword and shield, a way to confront his own inner demons while simultaneously cutting through the competitive world of hip-hop. First major breakthrough. The turning point came with Dr. Dre, one of hip-hop's most respected producers. After hearing Eminem's Slim Shady EP, Dre saw the raw potential in a young man whose life had been defined by struggle. Signing with Aftermath Entertainment in 1998 was the door Eminem had been knocking in his entire life. With Dre's mentorship, Eminem released the Slim Shady LP in 1999. The album was a commercial and critical success, catapulting him into international fame. But fame brought new pressures. Suddenly, Marshall's private battles, his insecurities, past trauma, and emerging addiction were under the microscope of global attention. Behind the spotlight and the applause, he was still the boy from Detroit, grappling with pain and searching for relief. Even as his music soared to the top of charts worldwide, Eminem's personal life began to unravel. The stress of fame, combined with unresolved childhood trauma and the constant pressure to perform, drew him deeper into prescription drugs. Pills that initially seemed like a way to cope soon became chains he could not easily break. By the mid-2000s, Eminem's drug use had escalated to a dangerous level. He became dependent on medications that numbed both his body and his mind. The once vibrant, razor-sharp lyricist found himself struggling to write, to perform, even to live each day without fear of collapse. Friends and family watched helplessly as he teetered on the brink of disaster. Critical turning point. 2007 was the year everything came to a head. Eminem suffered a near-fatal overdose, a moment that could have ended his life and certainly his career. Lying in a hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, he faced the stark truth. He could not continue down this path. The addiction had become more than a habit. It was a life-threatening force. It was in that moment of clarity, the confrontation with mortality, that Eminem made a choice. Not for fame, not for money, but for survival. He chose to fight. After that moment of clarity, lying in a sterile hospital bed with the relentless beeping of machines echoing in his ears, Eminem felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear mingled with hope. It was fear, raw and unavoidable, because for the first time he understood just how close he had come to the edge. It was hope, tentative yet insistent, because for the first time he realized that survival was still within reach. That hospital room became the crucible for a transformation, a place where the man who had once been invincible in the eyes of millions confronted his own vulnerability. Every small action became monumental. Simply taking a shower or walking down a corridor without medication was a victory. The withdrawal symptoms were relentless: sweating, trembling, nausea, insomnia. But each wave of discomfort was a reminder that the body, though battered, could heal. Each passing hour was a testament to resilience. Eminem's mind, once dulled by chemical dependence, slowly began to reclaim its sharpness. Thoughts that had been clouded by pills became clear, and the mental fog that had long overshadowed his creativity began to lift. Rehabilitation was not a linear process. Some days he felt capable of tackling anything, writing lyrics with intensity and passion that reminded him of why he had begun this journey in the first place. Other days, despair threatened to take over, whispering that he could never escape the shadow of addiction. It was in these moments that therapy and guidance became essential. Every session forced him to confront truths he had long avoided: the anger toward his past, the guilt for choices made, the deep-seated insecurities that had fueled both his brilliance and his self-destruction. Eminem realized that the fight was not just physical, but psychological. The substances had been a shield, a way to avoid feeling pain, facing trauma, and acknowledging his vulnerabilities. To stay sober, he needed to dismantle the mental structures that had allowed addiction to take root. This meant examining his relationships with his mother, his ex-wife, and most importantly, his daughter Haley. The stakes were clear. If he faltered, the consequences were no longer just personal. They could impact those he loved most. Music became both refuge and therapy. Each verse written in sobriety carried a different weight than those written under the influence. Words were deliberate, precise, and infused with the raw honesty of a man who had stared death in the face and chosen life. Eminem poured everything into his lyrics: pain, regret, hope, resilience. Songs were no longer just performances. They were testimonies, letters to himself and to the world, documenting the journey from darkness to light. Support systems played a crucial role. Friends who had watched helplessly now became allies in recovery. Family, once distant due to conflicts and misunderstandings, rallied around him. Haley's presence was a constant reminder of the life he wanted to preserve and the father he wanted to be. Every phone call, visit, and conversation was a brick in the foundation of his new, sober life. Even as the addiction began to loosen its grip, Eminem had to rebuild routines and habits that had long been disrupted. Exercise, nutrition, structured schedules, and mindfulness practices became tools for maintaining balance. Sobriety was not a single moment, but a series of continuous, deliberate choices. Every day was a decision to fight, not against others, but against the part of himself that had once surrendered to chemicals. Returning to the studio after rehabilitation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Eminem had to prove, first to himself, that his creativity was intact. The first beats, the first lines, the first recording sessions all carried the weight of his journey. But rather than fearing failure, he approached music with a newfound clarity. Each track became a reclamation of identity, an assertion that while addiction had taken much, it would not define his legacy.